Now, Africa's working age population is booming. The youth are hungry, they're educated, and they're ready to take on the world. But they're entering labor markets defined by informality, low productivity, and shrinking opportunities. With 73% of Africans working in informal or family businesses, the struggle for a decent income is pushing many to seek opportunities abroad. The big question is, can Africa's growth finally start creating jobs at scale? Well, it's not about to be a monologue. I will be joined by some amazing guests, one with us in the studio and the rest of them virtually. So I'd like to welcome Enoch Afolabi, an international business development leader in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Enoch, for joining us.
It's mine. Thank you.
All right. I would also like to welcome Toluwase Olaniyan, executive coach, joining us from Paris. Thank you so much, Toluwase, for joining us. Okay, we also have, all right, thanks for joining us. We also have Ronke Adeboye, a global job specialist, joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Ronke, for joining us as well.
Pleasure is mine.
All right, and then there is Eyitayo Ogunmola, who's joining, who's the CEO of UTIVA in New York. Thank you for joining us, Eyitayo.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
Oh, yeah, we're excited to have you join us as well. Thank you. Then we have our studio guest, Dr. Stone Makori, who's a career analyst. Thank you so much, Dr. Stone, for joining us as well.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
An absolute pleasure. All right, let's dive straight into the conversation, lady and gentlemen. Now, we have seen an increasing rise in the number of youths that do not have jobs. I mean, recently we've been talking about out-of-school children, but there's a different menace, and that is the number of jobless youths that we have across the African continent. Now, the World Bank has described Africa's growth as resilient but jobless, and I want us to find out what that means. I'll start with you, Enoch. When we talk about Africa, especially the economy being resilient but jobless, what do you think that relates to?
Okay. All right. It means that we are making progress, right? It means that we have recorded growth in our GDP. However, it's not reflecting on the opportunities for the labor market. What does that mean? You know that when we look at our African economy, mostly what drives it are the large sectors, say oil and gas, you have telecoms, you have technology as sectors that drive the economy. However, the middle, the small, the informal sector, where the larger scale, that accommodates rather the larger scale of the labor market, isn't influenced by that growth. And for that reason, you won't find, number one, more demand for the talents to fill up in that space. Number two, you won't find an increased earning capacity that has been allocated to the talents in that space. What you will find is the sectors who has the capacity to perhaps employ a few thousands, oil and gas, like I've mentioned earlier, telecoms, tech space, but with limited opportunities. However, when you look at the informal spaces or agriculture or manufacturing that has the capacity to take in millions and even has a very robust value chain that has a lot of requirements to fill, those sectors are not part of what drives the economic growth. And because there's no growth there, it doesn't translate to growth in the talent economy. That's what we're seeing in the disparity there.
All right, thank you for that, Enoch. Let me come to Toluwase. Now, we have seen, like Enoch said, there is a disparity, right? We talk about the economy growing and booming, and one would expect that the youth would also be able to find jobs, but unfortunately, that is not the case. So how can economic growth rise to 3.8%? While the wage employment is rising by only 0.04%. How do we balance the scale? What is missing?
Okay, so thank you for this interesting question. just like, taking off from where Enoch stopped, this is first a structural issue, and it has been on for ages, in the sense that we have not developed the areas that can absorb the most people, right? The areas that can absorb the most, we say, for example, the oil and gas is quite limited in the number of people that it can absorb into its workforce. If we had developed spaces like agriculture, we see that land and agricultural mechanisms are evenly distributed across the country. These areas would have onboarded a lot more, right? Now with the coming in of technology, this would have been a lot more easier, and scale would have been easier for us to. However, the economy currently developing or currently booming is being driven by certain areas that do not. So take, for example, an average telecom worker earns a certain figure. The disparity is wide as compared to the person's counterpart in the banking sector, very different from the person in the civil service, and then very different from people in the private sector generally, right? In SMEs and MSMEs. So you see, this disparity is structural in nature. However, this is a growing economy, right? I think that things are now being put together a lot more. I also see that the government at this time is beginning to put a bit of structure into this thing and see how it can be done. So yesterday I was just saying to someone that I think what we have run the economy and the government almost as a charity for a very long time. And I think that it's now almost being run as an entity that it should be, where productivity will then translate to the earnings of people directly, right? And these structures can be rearranged. And I think in the days ahead, we'll begin to see some level of improvement, right? As the economy grows, I think people's earning power would now also grow. Also see what the new tax regime would also bring, right? This is also trying to balance a few things to say, okay, if you earn around this place, your tax capacity or your tax burden is very much reduced, so that your take home and your living condition is a lot better. That way, even organization will be able to hire more people because, the taxes, so a few things are being restructured, right? So I think the restructures, it's been a structural issue over time. And I think this is also being currently worked on. As you see some changes in the economy, and I think the days ahead are also looking a bit looking brighter.
All right. Thank you so much, Toluwase, for that. Now to Ronke, would you say that this is a structural problem or a policy problem or a leadership problem? Which are we looking at?
All right, thank you so much for that question. So I'll say that looking at it, long-running firm size distribution, there are too many tiny firms, right? Infrastructural gaps, weak businesses, regulation, point incentives. Leadership matters for implementation, but it isn't the root cause, right? It's not the root cause. So it's not really about the structure alone. But then without leadership, without policies that encourage medium firms, it's still like the same thing. So I would not say it's a structural policy. It's not a structural, it's not a policy. It's just more of an interwoven issue. Like that's the way I would view that. It's mainly structural though, but because too many firms, like too many micro firms, there are too many mid-sized firms, like I mentioned, which has been worsened by weak policies and inconsistent leadership. So as much as I would say it's interwoven, I will majorly focus on it being a structural issue. So the question for me will now be, how can we fix a leaking roof if we don't repair the foundation? So yes, it's, to me, let me just focus on it being a structural problem. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ronke. Let me come to Eyitayo. And most times when this argument is raised, some people would be of the opinion that the population heavily impacts the labor market. Do you subscribe to that idea that the growing youth population, this question is for Eyitayo, heavily impacts on the labor market, on the African continent?
I like that you're asking me a population question, because I've always been very excited about the fact that we have an unfair advantage. You don't get to see a country like Nigeria with these huge and massive, youth population every time. And I think that this is our time. Think about it as a continent. Almost 620 million people are categorized within the working age group. However, this is a demand and supply, equation. The supply is the talent population that we have, the youth population that we have, but we also need to cluster that and ask ourselves, of the 620 million young people that are categorized as, working age, how many of them, have we actually developed with the right skills, the right knowledge, the right capacity, but most importantly, the right attitude for local and global jobs? I was reading yesterday one of the articles published on LinkedIn by one of the people that I really respect, and this person has started and launched more than 4 different technology companies. And his conclusion was that African talent, with more emphasis on Nigerian talent, some sort of mess up, businesses. And it gave me a good time to think about and reflect about the fact that we just wouldn't want to double click the fact that we have 620 million young people. We want to focus so much on the capacity, the skills, the knowledge, and most importantly, the attitude to work of that population. But building on that is another structural and foundational problem, as Ronke alluded to. The fact that, we don't have infrastructure to support massive job mobility, as a continent, right? Yet, let me use the word yet, because things have improved over time. When I got into the space of tech, internet was still at 2G, and it was frustrating, right? You would spend almost 1 hour trying to open one Yahoo mail, and you have to probably go and buy popcorn and come back. The Yahoo mail is still rolling. Today, things are a lot better. We have internet penetration, mobile phone penetration, access to job platforms are increasing. And one of the things I really love is the fact that there are more organizations that are training African talent and investing into the youth population. But it's still a broken message that we haven't fixed. And the broken link is this. We now have the youth population, we have the internet penetration, we have more organizations that are training this talent and investing into them, but we need to solve the job logistical problems, right? We need to fix payment, at that scale. And what do I mean? If a young person gets a job with a company abroad, you want to ensure that that person gets his or her money fast, right? Hence creating an incentive for creativity. I also think that the government needs to start to partner with private sector to create subsidiary incubators, right? Every large enterprise, as Enoch has mentioned, the oil and gas, the banking, the telecoms, they have fundamental foundational problems that as a large enterprise, they cannot solve because they are too robust and too big to solve those minor problems. But with a government-private sector partnership, we can begin to build incubators and accelerators within these large enterprises. This happens a lot in the US and in Europe, where we say GT Bank and the government, we are partnering. Sorry, I'm calling GT Bank, I'm calling them out. And the government say, let's partner to build an incubator so that we can absorb another 1,000 fintech entrepreneurs. We do the same thing in the FMCG. We do the same thing in the oil and gas, in the manufacturing, in the agriculture sector, and creating a platform for massive investments. And every time you invest in a young or a youth-led company, you also increase, workforce hiring at that level. And that's pretty much the way I think about it.
All right, thank you so much for that. That was in-depth. It almost felt as though you were waiting for that particular question, but thank you so much, Eyitayo. All right, let me come to my guest in the studio, Dr. Livingstone. And my worry now, let's look at the timeline. Now, between 2025 and 2050, Africa most likely will add 620 million working age adults. What would this mean for jobs by the time that happens?
Thank you very much. I'll start from where my colleagues have said, and the beginning is, are we having the right skills? Is the government investing in the right areas? So I'll mention this in 2 things. One, let me start with why we don't have jobs, the right jobs. The industries that are grow the continent are not employing, they are not observing people. So then what does the government need to do in areas that support youth? That will be the key thing. Currently, Africa is adding 22 million jobs every year to the job market. But when you look at industries like tourism, which absorb more, agriculture, we've not given the farmers, we've not given those industries incentive to be able to move forward. So what could Africa do in the year 2025, 2050? A year all of us maybe probably will be old enough. What will we do in 2050? Again, bringing all the partners together. What is the private sector doing to create more jobs? What are schools and colleges doing? One of the key things we have, even with these issues, is skills mismatch. We may not have the right people, as my colleague from US has said, doing the jobs. So what Africa must do now is to ensure that we have the right people for the jobs that are coming up. How do we prepare our youth to make sure that by the time they come up, these jobs come up, they are ready to take them up? As we create incentives for, let's say, oil and gas, are Africans working there? We still have multinationals managing those organizations. So the moment we build skills around our youth, that's the only time we can be able to create sustainable future for the youth by the year 2050.
All right, really interesting. Thank you so much for that. Let me come back to Enoch now. Let's talk about the seeming stagnation of small businesses. So the question is, why are small businesses seemingly stuck in survival mode instead of growing into medium or large enterprises? So we've heard over and over again that you don't have to wait for the government to, help you with jobs and things like that. But then again, we have a situation where entrepreneurs are we have a lot of budding entrepreneurs, but it looks like a lot of them are stuck, in survival mode. They don't go beyond average, or they don't go beyond medium for some reason. Why do you think that is?
Now, thank you for that question. Particularly, I personally am, it's a big deal for me whenever we talk about growth, especially as we have such a very hardworking population. But when we talk about the factors that are affecting these businesses, it is important for us to understand that a large portion of it is an environmental thing. And what do I mean by environment? We're talking about the access to resources, and resources can come from the form of infrastructure, finance, the fact that there's a lack of long-term credits. And sometimes even when you find these credits, they come at such a very high interest rate that is not affordable by practical businesses, And also even at the rates to these businesses do not have the capital to even meet, the collateral rather, to meet some of the demands that this credits requires from them. And then for anybody who's trying to start a business here, and you've had to probably interact with the regulatory managers. You know what you have to go through. Sometimes you get met with such a bureaucratic process. While I give the government thumbs up for streamlining some processes, we've seen certain ministries and also certain industries who are heavy on regulation, finding that the processes are being streamlined, maybe being moved online in order to curb excesses of corruption or bureaucratic vested interest, for the lack of a better word. There are also still a very large portion of businesses that are still heavy on regulations that still meet constraints. And I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I made an acquaintance at a summit who was looking to get a LASA license, and he has been at it for over a year. I'm like, this is an enthusiastic man, a young man who has acquired some capital and wants to start something interesting. However, he is, just so that I don't speak too ill, of the process. But the experiences that he has had has not only limited, but also even at a level begin to discourage, his enthusiasm for doing the work. And then let's talk about infrastructure deficit. When you're talking about manufacturing or even agriculture, it's no news the constraints we have with transportation, safety and security, which is also one of the nearest issue that, almost became a global light, not even almost, became a global light that some international entities began to, exploit, to press on the nation. These influence the reality of how much growth that small businesses can have. Because when you're looking at, oh, I'm doing a great job, and I'm thinking of scaling, but I don't have the resource to scale. Or I'm doing a fantastic work at producing, but in order for me to take my produce to the market, transportation is tough. And now I have to be the one who finds the money, builds my own infrastructure, in order to scale. And then also I have to beg and fight the person who is going to ensure that my business has a legal standing. There's just so much that you have to address before you get to the point of trying to even scale. And then the final point on top is, skills gap, where we have a difficulty of finding reliable employees with a mix of technical skill sets and soft skills. There's just a large scale of cultural mismatch and etc. happening. These all just culminate into how the experiences of the businesses are in the reality of the market. And if there are no interventions to ensure that small businesses are prioritized and their needs also prioritized, in a scale where it is deliberate, with adequate policies in place and plans also put in place, we will continue to just have a non-existing middle market and just small, even nano, in the case of businesses that just exist in the market.
All right, thank you so much for that. And it's a very salient point you raised about skills gap. And I think skills are not the only thing that seem to be missing, because my next question, let me target that at Toluwase. Many people would say that Africa has, or, the Western world has an unfair advantage, in terms of infrastructure. So my question is, how much of Africa's unemployment crisis is tied to poor infrastructure, poor electricity, high business costs, and the likes? I think your device is muted, if you can hear me.
Oh, pardon me. So it's a pretty interesting question, right? And I'm really, really mindful not to reel out numbers, but I think that over 50% of our crisis, of our problem, is hinged around infrastructural challenge. One of which is power, right? A large number of, in fact, companies, processes in Nigeria end at, a lot of processes in Nigeria end at 5 p.m. every day. We are competing with nations who work round the clock. So we work 12 hours as a nation, where other people work, other nations work 12 hours, right? This cannot be balanced. We cannot compare, right? People do night shift, morning shifts, afternoon shift, night shift. And in Nigeria, we do just 9 to 5 and we go home, right? We cannot compare the productivity of both nations, at any point. I think that, also, Enoch had rightly mentioned interest rates, access to facilities, all of these things have been the Goliath facing our David for a very long time and not allowing us scale. It is very difficult to move beyond this, particularly power, right? I'll stay on power for a bit, and I probably would end there. Literally everybody, people who work from home need power, small businesses need power. So you can imagine small businesses who, at the end of a month, would have spent, for example, 200,000 naira on processing and creating power for themselves. How much profit would they have possibly made, right? This would in turn tell on the productivity of the employees within the organization. It would tell even on the productivity of the organization as a whole, right? Employment will be brought to almost a standstill because, again, the money we used to hire you, we used to provide power for ourselves, right? So infrastructure have been a very strong issue for us. And I think that if we're able to move beyond this, if we're able to solve some of this, right? Some of it, some part of the country now have maybe 18 hours, 20 hours of power, which means we're getting there. Now that we're moving there, we now need to begin to restructure and rework how our models are. Generally, how do we now want to work? Manufacturing, how do we want to work? Refinery, banking, all of it. So all of it, how do we now want to work as these things? Well, yes, I think, so adding power and other things, maybe 60% of our challenges are generally being around infrastructure. And I think as we begin to resolve this gradually, things become easier.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me come to Ronke now. I want us to talk about the practicality of what we learn across the African continent, which some have also termed a barrier, when it comes to doing business and even finding jobs and being functional, basically, in the society. How big would you say is the mismatch between what we learn in schools, and what we practice outside of schools? Because you see students, young people complaining over and over again that what they're being taught in schools is far different from what they're experiencing in real life. We're still trying to find X till today. We haven't found it. So what is the level of mismatch, you would say, especially on the African continent? Go to China and some other developed countries. You see students in colleges building things, iPhones and the rest. Why is it that we're more theoretical than practical? We're hardly ever practical.
All right, thank you so much. In reality, looking at what we actually learn, like the curriculum and everything we learn in school, comparing it to the real labor market, it's really mismatched, yes. Many graduates right now lack a lot of skills that a lot of employers need, right? So I just feel like looking at it, we actually need to inculcate real skills in her curriculum. So that's why you see that most times when you look at what we say today, like a common says, especially here in Nigeria, you hear them saying, oh, it's not about what you studied in school, it's about the skills you have and everything. So it just that statement alone obviously shows that there is just so much mismatch in what we learn. So it's really important that IT graduates with theoretical knowledge, like degrees, but they have no practical skills on it. It's always based on the theory. There's nothing practical. So it's very important that we actually inculcate practicality more in our curriculum, more like having to have a curriculum upgrade. I think we've been clamoring for that of recent. Now it's really high time we did that and make that happen so that the mismatch in skills and what we learn in school gets to be reduced. So I think that answers that.
All right, thank you so much. I'll ask one more question before we go on a short break. Eyitayo, I think the answer to this question is almost a no-brainer, but I'll just ask it all the same. Why do you think that so many young Africans now see migration as the most rational path to financial stability?
Because it makes sense to be abroad. It does make sense to be abroad. It feels like and things have changed on the continent. I'm grateful for that. But in those days, it felt like we're not really serious, right? It felt like you as a young person, you've got your own life and you're patriotic. You want to contribute to your country. But then when you sit down and you reflect and you look at your counterpart, I do that a lot, right? And I've got business in Nigeria. I'm hiring almost 100 people, cumulatively across all my businesses. And sometimes when I look at my friends and look at my colleagues and look at my partners that are abroad, and when I have meetings with them, sometimes I feel a bit of regret. I feel a bit of, maybe I should have moved so many years ago. When I look at some of the things that they have achieved and some of the things that I haven't had the opportunity to achieve, sometimes I feel that this is like time and life wasted. So when you look at young people who have got energy, they've got intelligence, they've got brilliance, and they have their lives ahead of them, the biggest question in everybody's mind is that my time is going. I'm contributing all these. I'm helping my country. But will my country also step up for me when I need my country? When I get into a health crisis, will my country help me? I was speaking with a young chap yesterday who went on an interview, and 2 minutes into the interview, PHCN as usual, did justice. It's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. All these things are the things we need to fix. So when you look at the numbers, 37% of adults want to move abroad. That's 1 out of every 3 person that you talk to. At the same time, there's a value with talent that are moving abroad. Talents abroad are contributing expertise, back home. Remittance is increasing. The middle when you think about the low income earners and the middle income earners, you would see that the disparity is also shrinking. Like the numbers, are growing. Young chaps are raising money. I used to say that it's almost impossible for you as an entrepreneur in Nigeria to raise real capital for your business without, intervention from folks in the diaspora. So when you look at the two-edged swords, it feels like, hey, we're draining the labor market. In Africa, they're losing the best of us. But on the other side, the guys that we're losing that are moving abroad are also contributing value, back home. You look at the tourism, the Lagos Jakarta concept, Debt December that is happening. All that is basically contribution from Africans and Nigerians in diaspora. So, but what we should do right now is that we should also invest more in ensuring that we are capturing a larger chunk of the remittance. Nothing is broken in terms of the moving of the money back home. We need to continue to improve the skills of those who are not migrating, those who are still at home. But what I would do, I would also think more about how to leverage the expertise of Nigerians in diaspora, because they've got a very huge, robust expertise. So how many more doctors can we move back home, to build, facilities here? I'll stop there.
All right, thank you so much. You're still live with us on Fafanua Afrika, and there's a very pivotal conversation. Why are African youths looking for global opportunities and running away from the continent? What is broken that needs to be fixed? We go on a short break now. When we come back, Fafanua Afrika continues with my amazing guests. Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. It's still Fafanua Afrika, and we're still talking about why young Africans seem to be migrating, to other parts of the world and somehow abandoning the continent. But then if you look at it on a larger scale, we've talked a lot about the things that are the gaps that need to be filled for young Africans to be gainfully employed. And we still have our amazing guests with us. My next question is targeted at my studio guest, and that is Dr. Stone Makori. Dr. Stone, would you consider the migration itself, especially the level of migration that we experience on the African continent or from the African continent, as a failure of governance? And what gaps do you think need to be filled for, to mitigate the number of people who are leaving the country in droves every year, every month?
Thank you very much. For me, when you look at the movement, we cannot blame anyone specifically, but again, people have to take responsibility. And the responsibility starts from us, ourselves. One of the key things that is driving people out of our African continent is, do they have the right jobs in the market? So on that front, the government needs to create the enabling environment for the growth of high labor absorption industries. Take the example of the internet in Africa. We are saying Africans, Kenya is a leading internet experts in this market. But do we have enough internet in the villages? How do the young people in the villages able to implement that? That's one failure of government. If government is able to provide that internet, then we have room for growth. Number 2 is about financing. Do we have enabling environment? And this is again is a discussion around industry and government to ensure that we have enabling structures that give private sector enough funds to run their business. But again, generally, when people are moving out of the continent, it's not about failure of anyone. It's failure that started at the beginning. Do we have the right education system that gives the right skills? If you look at the research, 75% of the employees, I was looking at the report in Kenya, 75% of employees in Africa, which is Kenya, Angola, and considering Kenya, Angola, and Nigeria, are not able to fit into the job market. Why? Because of the structural failures. How do we choose our careers? We wake up one day and choose careers. Then after that, we go ahead and say, you can do any job so long as you have a degree. So right from the beginning, from parents where they are seated, we need to guide our youth in choosing the right careers. Start from there. Once they have chosen the right careers, we have the professionals and the industry provide the internship opportunities for the youth, so that if the youth have internship opportunities, it gives them room to learn and be able to know, what can I do as a person? Then we move on to our education system. I believe our education system needs a better overhaul to look at how best do we link industry to academy. As much as we have good grades coming from universities, those young people cannot be able to do the right job. The industry, how technology is moving so fast, the roles we are creating are not commensurate to how learning institutions are changing their curriculum. So again, curriculum review will be an important thing where industry have to sit down with the learning institutions and agree what are some of the few areas that young people need to learn. We cannot sit as industry, wait for the youth to come from universities and then blame the universities for giving us wrong graduates. So even those who are employed among us, have you ever sat down with the university and guided them on what you expect from among their youth? Are we giving them this feedback so that they have feedback to know the youth you are giving me, they lack 1, 2, 3. We know these skills as professionals. Have you gone to those students and speak to them? So the role of mentorship, again, career counseling and guidance cannot be ruled out. There's a clear Office of Career Services which is being established in Kenya, and I believe in every learning institution need to have that. That office is very key in enabling the youth, students, acquire the right skills, acquire the right level of employment requirement required before they move to the job market. If I was in government today, one of the things I'd do is to make sure that each and every SME is giving opportunities for the youth to learn. That could be one of the tax incentives, that if youth are given opportunities to learn how this business is done, then it gives them a better opportunity to be able to negotiate as they move forward. So for me, yes, government has something to do, but all of us, stakeholders, parents, students, everyone has a role to play in ensuring that there's an enabling and we have the right skills for the job market.
All right, thank you so much. One more round of questions. Let me come back to Enoch now. What practical reforms can African governments implement? Let's say that we want to become a continent that boosts job creation in the next 5 years. What are these practical reforms that the African governments can implement to make that possible?
All right. Let's center back to what the responsibility of the government is practically to create an environment, excuse me, for its people, right, to thrive. As far as business is concerned, we can't expect the government to do everything. Government can't be the savior. And I'm sure that throughout the course of the conversations we've had so far, especially with the other guests, you've listened to examples of collaboration with the private sector. You've listened to examples that have been shared about what we need to do across industries and also value chain. And it's just pretty simple. What the government needs to do is just pretty simple. Number one, simplify the regulatory process. How can we have a good standing? We want to have a good standing that allows us to have access to all the resources that the government is making available. So just simplify the whole process. Have a one-stop shop that allows us to, for a digital platform for businesses to handle registration, licensing, and even tax filing, right? In order for us to cut the bureaucracy and corruption, which is a major parasite that really hits the entire process, that not just only hinders businesses to get started, but also even impacts the kind of results and growth that the government wants from the nation. The second thing is also to prioritize infrastructure that enhances the growth of industries, which things we've also alluded to, like talking about energy, talking about transportation, talking about security. We've been crying about these things, but they are really just obvious things. And I don't think we should never get to the point where we stop lending our voices to being vocal about what is really, really needed by the sector. So it's very important for us to prioritize, like I said, how digitizing regulation in order for excesses to be curtailed, infrastructure provided, and then invest in value addition, right? Targeting the mid-level, or the informal markets, or even the industries that have the capacity to accommodate more talents, and incentivizing the process. We've seen certain examples maybe done in agriculture before, but there's a slowdown on them. Attention should be paid to manufacturing, providing resources and then also creating programs that ensure these businesses can thrive. Eyitayo has made mention about the remittance of diaspora back to the African nations. Not just only that, to creating a gateway for investment, because aside from just remittance, diaspora is interested in a safe environment for investment. Why don't you create the environment that allows the diaspora to have the confidence? And when we look at the numbers, diaspora's remittance is quite higher than foreign investment in certain industries, right? So why don't you create an environment that allows things to thrive? That's really just a priority. Government should look at creating environments that allow businesses to thrive. In those three key areas, that's where I'll start.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let me come to Toluwase now. How can the private sector become a larger engine for job creation across the continent? I think you're muted again.
Okay, pretty interesting question. I apologize. So two things I would say, and this is one thing I have said, every time and when I'm in the room with business leaders and having conversations. One is we need a very solid handshake between the universities, tertiary institutions, and the private sector. A solid town and gown handshake. The primary source for talent, the primary source for raw material for Nigerian businesses is the tertiary institutions in Nigeria. That's the primary source for talent. That's the primary source for, oil for them. Now, interest in how these talents are being worked on and produced should be a key interest for this private sector. Now, that way, the quality of people who then come from these institutions become better with a solid handshake. Now, this would impact the curriculum design first. So by the time these people are coming out from these universities, they come out better, refined products that can perfectly support the private sector. So take, for example, a bank, so not to mention it, a bank is vested in supporting a particular faculty across the nation, knowing that this bank has branches across the nation. Now, supporting that particular department means that as graduates come out from that institution, they're able to find marketable and relatable placement in the labor market because they have been trained with industry standard. Advanced nations do this, right? Generally, so I think that's pretty important that we have a solid town and gown handshake in first the refining of talent coming out of this space. Now, what that would also do is it would help us improve the quality of talent. I am never scared to say that the jobs are available. Now, sometimes the capacity of talent to fill these jobs that are available is also a problem, right? A few times I have hired for brands, and I hear people would say, oh, don't worry, instead of increasing our team, we would expand our budget for our current team, pay people more and have them do more within the organization instead of bringing more people to come into the organization. And this is because people do not want to struggle with talent issues, right? So that's one. Now, right, just like Eyitayo mentioned earlier, it is also very important that we have the private sector supporting talent development organizations, right? Where we have this private sector having a hand. He mentioned the bank earlier and asked that, this bank can have an incubator program or an accelerator program within their own system. Now, this industry knowledge is very important.
Okay.
Now, remember that
I'm so sorry, but because of our time, okay, you can just wrap up.
Okay, so not only the brand will then benefit from these talents, from this talent engineering, other sectors will benefit. And that would then, as a matter of fact. I mean, expand the job pool, increase quality, and then help a lot of people to get into the drive.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to take everyone's the final questions before the time goes off. So please, let's just limit our answers as much as possible. So let me come to Ronke now. What sectors would you say hold the strongest potential for jobs at scale? As a global job specialist, would you say it's agriculture, manufacturing, the digital economy, renewable energy? Which one?
All right, thank you so much. So looking at sectors, I'll say as the strongest global job creation potential in Africa, I would not say just one sector, right? I would say in Africa, it includes different sectors, like you mentioned, agriculture, the labor-intensive manufacturing, the digital economy, very important because that's the space I play in. And of course, renewable energy too is not written off. So but right now, I'll put my focus more on the digital economy, right? Digital economy offers a lot of scalable jobs through IT services, outsourcing, data work, and of course, digital platforms driven by young, great talent. They are all tech. Like right now, we are pushing for a tech-active population. And this is made possible through affordable broadband, digital skills program, and of course, supportive regulation that help another engine for job creation. It's a great engine for job creation because having the right skills give a lot of opportunities, and it's more like you have great talent who are opportune to be connected with great employers in the global north, that talent in the global south being able to be connected with great employers in the global north. And this is a very great one. So I'll just put my focus on, of course, the digital economy, definitely.
All right, thank you so much for that. Eyitayo, how would you say Africa can benefit from global labor shortages without having to lose its brightest minds?
Yeah, I like that, and I would like to end on that, because there's a crisis globally, right? And the crisis is hinged on three major factors. Number one is that other parts of the world that have over the years supplied talent to the global north, and by the global north we mean more developed countries where there are a larger chunk of job opportunities, are becoming overpriced, right? And employers always want to do their mathematics to ask themselves the value they get in return for the money they spend. So this gives Africa an opportunity, right? The second opportunity is, of course, the fact that we've got a very great time zone. Think about Nigeria. We've got a very great time zone. We can capture the entire European market without struggling. And of course, the third thing that I think is a big value is our population and the investment that the government and the private sectors are putting into skill development. So my recommendation would be four things. Number one is we need to go back to the universities and shake hands with the universities, because as Enoch alluded to, that is the largest supply of talent, right? And I work with the universities, and I always tell the lecturers in the universities when they tell me, oh, everybody cannot study tech. I say, but you give them admission in courses that they are not even excited about in the first place anyway. You ask someone who wanted to study medicine to come and study plant biology, and I then come at the third year and I say, well, you've wasted this person's 3 years studying a course that he's not excited about, but we can give that person an alternative career, and that's the way we need to shake hands with the universities in partnership with the private. One more thing I want to mention before I leave.
All right, very quickly, please.
Yes, the rails for helping the companies in this region to find our talent. It's not enough to say that we've got great talent in Africa. They must be able to find them. And finding them means that we must invest in organizations that are focused not only on training, but also on job placement.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now, last but not the least, without wasting much time, let me come to Dr. Livingstone now. I'm conflicted as to which particular question to ask, but let me just ask, if Africa gets job creation right, what could our continent look like by 2035? Very quickly.
Thank you very much. We have an advantage as Africa. One, we have the natural resources, plenty in Africa. Number two, we have the young population. 75% of the young people are in Africa, below 35%. So if we get it right from lower years get the right careers. Young people do the right careers, and there are tools to help in that. How do we support? Support the Offices of Career Services to be able to understand, guide young learners on the right careers to take. Let them be trained on those skills, get employed, and maybe guidance through the businesses. Then we have a suitable candidate for a job. So if Africa does that, I see Africa being the biggest thing in this market. So what is the way forward? All of us, take your time, wherever you are, whatever you can do, help nurture a future-ready leader. Help nurture the best environment for business, and all of us will grow as a continent.
All right, thank you so much. Well, on that note, we would have to end the session now. It's been a very insightful and very interesting conversation, but I want to say a big thank you to our guests, Enoch, Afolabi, Toluwase Olaniyan, Ronke Adeboye, Eyitayo Ogunmola, and Dr. Stone Makori. Thank you for lending your voice to this very important conversation. It's Fafanua Afrika. Do well to join us in our subsequent episodes as we discuss the opportunities and challenges of the youth and how to navigate all of this on the African continent. I'm Blessings Musugu. It's been an absolute pleasure being your host. Have a wonderful rest of your day.